The mockery. The grand courtroom buzzed with the quiet murmurs of early morning cases. It was a typical day: DUIs, noise complaints, minor thefts. Judge Meredith Lancaster, a sharp-tongued woman in her late 50s, sat on the elevated bench, her black robe draped dramatically around her as if she were royalty. To her, the courtroom was her kingdom, and those who entered, her subjects to mock or dismiss at will. The bailiff called the next case. Case number 4721, regarding obstruction of public property. Defendant, Miss Harper Lewis. Heads turned as Harper walked toward the defendant's table. She wore a simple gray skirt and a navy blue blouse, polished yet understated. Her posture was straight, almost regal, but her work boots and a visible ring of calluses on her hands gave her away. This was no rich woman. This was a working woman. Judge Lancaster squinted at Harper. "Miss Lewis, are you lost?" "Janitorial staff used the service entrance," she said with a smirk, her voice slicing through the courtroom like a dagger. A ripple of laughter echoed from the spectators. Harper, unfazed, kept her calm. She placed her worn leather satchel on the table, methodically pulling out a stack of carefully arranged papers. "I am here on business, Your Honor," Harper said smoothly. "Business?" Lancaster chuckled, flipping through her case file without looking at her. "The only business you look fit for is mopping these floors." The courtroom laughed again, a little louder this time. Even the bailiff smirked. Lancaster leaned back in her chair, feeling victorious in the way that only bullies do when they think they've humiliated someone. Harper's dark eyes remained steady. She knew this game. She had seen it played 1,000 times before. Assumptions based on skin color, on calloused hands, on humble attire. She inhaled slowly through her nose, willing herself not to react yet. The charges were a joke, a minor misunderstanding at the civic center where she worked. An incident involving a wrongly issued fine for supposedly obstructing a hallway with cleaning equipment during a late-night deep cleaning. Harper had contested the fine in writing, but it had been dismissed without review. Now, absurdly, she found herself standing in court. Lancaster didn't even pretend to take the case seriously. She rattled off the allegations with exaggerated boredom, sneaking glances at Harper as if daring her to object. Mop buckets blocking emergency exits. Unauthorized use of maintenance closets. Interference with civic traffic flow. Harper listened patiently. She could have interrupted a dozen times, pointing out inaccuracies, biases, outright lies, but she waited. Timing was everything. Finally, Lancaster threw down the file with a dramatic sigh. "Well, Miss Lewis, since you're already so well acquainted with cleaning supplies, maybe I should just sentence you to 30 days cleaning courthouse bathrooms. Might be a step up for you." The courtroom erupted again. Harper reached slowly into her satchel. The room quieted a little, sensing something different. She pulled out a small, dark leather case, opened it carefully, and held it up for the judge to see. A badge. But not just any badge. A Supreme Court of the United States Judicial Oversight Officer badge. The room froze. Silence swept through like a cold wind. Lancaster leaned forward, squinting as if the badge were some illusion. What is this?" she stammered, her voice losing its sharpness for the first time. Harper's voice was calm but carried the force of undeniable authority. "It means, Your Honor, that I am here not as a defendant, but as an undercover officer assigned by the Supreme Court's Judicial Conduct Review Board. I was tasked to investigate allegations of systemic discrimination, bias, and abuse of authority in lower municipal courts, including this one." Gasps broke out among the spectators. The bailiff looked like he might faint. Lancaster's face turned crimson. You're lying," she said weakly, but her words were hollow. Harper placed the badge on the table with deliberate grace, then pulled out a second item, a letter bearing the official gold seal of the Chief Justice, authorizing her investigation. The judge's gavel trembled slightly in her hand as Harper fixed her with a gaze that no longer sought permission or understanding. It demanded accountability. And this was only the beginning. The turning tide. For several moments, no one in the courtroom dared to breathe. Judge Lancaster sat stiffly in her chair, her hands still frozen in midair where she had been about to bang her gavel. The familiar warmth of power, which had always enveloped her in this room, was evaporating rapidly, replaced by a chilling uncertainty. Harper Lewis remained standing, composed and unflinching. She picked up the official letter bearing the Supreme Court seal and began reading aloud in a voice that was calm yet carried like a clarion bell through the tense courtroom. Under the authority of the Judicial Conduct Review Board, and by executive order of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, Investigator Harper Lewis is hereby granted full access to court proceedings, court documents, and may conduct covert assessments of judicial officers suspected of misconduct, bias, or abuse of power, effective immediately and retroactively for the term of her undercover operations. When she finished, Harper placed the letter neatly on the table beside the badge and finally met Judge Lancaster's widening eyes. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "your conduct today, including your public mockery, racial disparagement, and prejudicial assumption of my role based solely on appearance, will be part of my official report to Washington, D.C." A gasp went through the room, louder this time. Lancaster's mouth opened and closed helplessly like a stranded fish. You misunderstood." Harper tilted her head slightly. "I understood perfectly," she said. "You judged me before hearing a single fact of the case. You mocked my supposed profession, implying it made me less worthy of dignity. You encouraged the courtroom to join in public humiliation based on my race and class." The gallery, which had once been full of smug faces, now wore expressions of dawning horror. Some people even looked ashamed. A few began to slip quietly out the back doors, wanting no part in what was coming next. Lancaster tried to regain control, slamming the gavel down harder than necessary. "This court is now in recess," she barked, desperate to end the humiliation. But Harper didn't move. Instead, she casually pulled out a slim digital recorder from her satchel and pressed a button. The tinny sound of Lancaster's earlier mocking words echoed through the courtroom. "Janitors use the service entrance, the only business you're fit for is mopping floors." The recording was crystal clear. Harper turned it off and spoke again, her voice still cool but now layered with unmistakable authority. "You were advised, per the court's ethical standards, that all court sessions are considered matters of public record," she said. "As an oversight investigator, I am permitted to collect evidence without announcing myself. This evidence will be reviewed by a committee of your peers in Washington. If necessary, a formal misconduct trial will be convened." Lancaster was visibly sweating now. Her powdered face had taken on a ghastly sheen. "You can't, this is entrapment," she spat, desperate for a lifeline. Harper arched an eyebrow. "Entrapment?" she repeated softly. "Entrapment would require that I induced you to commit misconduct. I did no such thing. You freely chose to humiliate and belittle me without cause." The bailiff, unsure of where his loyalty should lie, shifted nervously by the door. Across the courtroom, attorneys whispered frantically among themselves. Several defendants, those who had long felt the sting of injustice, looked at Harper with wide, grateful eyes. To them, she wasn't just an investigator, she was justice personified. Harper stepped around the table and faced the courtroom gallery. "Let it be known," she said loudly, "that this court is under formal investigation for systematic bias, abuse of authority, and violation of the Equal Protection Clause. All proceedings in this courtroom are suspended until a replacement judge. The revolution begins." Harper Lewis exited the courthouse through the front doors, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing against her back. But she didn't buckle under it. She stood taller. The sun was shining, the street humming with life, and for the first time in a long time Harper felt the fresh, sweet taste of victory, not just for herself but for everyone who had ever been mocked, judged, or crushed under the heels of systemic injustice. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Word had traveled fast. A judge had been removed mid-session. Harper could hear murmurs. "Did you see that badge? She's with the Supreme Court. She's one of us, and she stood up to them." A young woman with a clipboard approached hesitantly. "Miss Lewis?" she asked. "I'm from the city's civil rights watchdog group. We've been trying to gather evidence of judicial misconduct for months, but they always shut us down. How did you get the Supreme Court involved?" Harper smiled softly. "It didn't happen overnight," she said. "It took years." The woman's eyes widened. "Years." The word echoed in Harper's mind, pulling her back through a labyrinth of memories, each one a stone in the road she had walked to get here. Harper had grown up in a tight-knit black community in the heart of Atlanta. Her parents were school teachers, fierce believers in education as the key to liberation. They raised her on stories of Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, and Fannie Lou Hamer. From a young age, Harper understood that change was not a gift, it was a fight. Despite being an honor student, she faced discrimination daily. Teachers underestimated her. College counselors advised her to lower her ambitions. She remembered sitting in a guidance counselor's office when she was 17, proudly announcing she wanted to be a constitutional lawyer. The counselor had smiled thinly and said, "Sweetheart, maybe you should think about something more realistic. Maybe a nice job in clerical work or maintenance." Asterisk. It wasn't just words. It was the system preparing her for a life of smallness. But Harper had other plans. She fought tooth and nail for scholarships, got into Howard University, and then Yale Law on sheer grit. There, she realized something vital. Fighting individual cases wasn't enough. Real change had to start by holding the system's gatekeepers accountable. The judges, the clerks, the court administrators who operated behind the curtain. After law school, she joined the Office of Judicial Ethics, climbing through layers of bureaucracy that would have crushed a lesser spirit. She saw firsthand how hard it was to prosecute judicial misconduct. Most judges were protected by thick walls of privilege and excuses. They were considered untouchable. That's when she proposed something radical, an undercover program. What if, instead of waiting for complaints, they embedded investigators who could experience courts as ordinary citizens? The program was controversial, dangerous, but Harper volunteered immediately. And so began a 3-year journey that led her here, posing as a janitor, a secretary, a single mother seeking custody, a young woman contesting traffic tickets, all to gather evidence. All to build a case strong enough that even the most arrogant judges would have no choice but to face justice. Today's victory was just one small piece of that larger puzzle. The young woman with the clipboard looked awed. Harper handed her a card. "Send me everything you've collected. Every complaint. Every affidavit. Every whisper you couldn't prove. We're building a national database. The Supreme Court has agreed to prioritize cases where patterns of abuse emerge." The woman clutched the card as if it were a golden ticket. "Thank you," she whispered. As Harper moved through the crowd, more people stepped forward. An elderly black man in a faded veteran's cap shook her hand. "You're what my granddaddy prayed for," he said. A Latina mother hugged her tightly, whispering about how her teenage son had been railroaded by a corrupt judge. A white college student held up his phone, live streaming. "This is history," he said into the camera. "We're witnessing history." Harper smiled, but deep inside she knew this was only the beginning. By the end of the week, news outlets across the country were ablaze with the story. Judge removed mid-trial in historic Supreme Court sting operation. Systemic court bias exposed, Supreme Court investigator speaks out. Harper Lewis, the woman who dared to hold judges accountable. Interviews, opinion pieces, debates on national television. Harper's name became a symbol. Some hailed her as a hero, others tried to smear her, questioning her credentials, her motives, her background. But Harper didn't flinch. She had prepared for this. During a CNN interview, when a pundit accused her of undermining public faith in the judicial system, Harper leaned into the camera and said, "Public faith is undermined not by exposure, but by injustice itself. Accountability strengthens faith. Secrecy rots it from the inside out." The clip went viral. Young people, especially black and brown youth who had long felt crushed by courts, rallied around her. Social media exploded with hashtags. #Harper for Justice. #Courts aren't above the law. #Changes now. Local organizations started training programs to teach citizens how to document court abuses properly. Universities invited Harper to speak about systemic reform. Petitions flooded Washington demanding that the undercover court oversight program be expanded nationwide. In less than a month, several other corrupt judges across different states either resigned preemptively or were suspended under investigation. A movement had begun. One evening, after a long day of testimony and briefings, Harper sat alone on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The sky was painted in strokes of purple and gold as the sun dipped below the horizon. She pulled out a photograph from her satchel, an old, worn picture of her parents standing proudly in front of their modest home, arms around a much younger Harper, who clutched a battered book titled The Constitution for Kids. She smiled through tears. She wished they were alive to see this. They had always believed that the law could be a tool for good, that it could be reclaimed from the powerful and wielded for the people. Harper pressed the photograph against her chest, feeling their presence, their dreams, their endless encouragement. "This is just the start," she whispered, because it wasn't enough to expose injustice. The real work was building a system where dignity wasn't a privilege for the few but a birthright for all. And Harper Lewis was ready to build it, brick by brick, courtroom by courtroom, heart by heart. The revolution had begun. And there was no stopping it now.